Such an interesting fight coming up this weekend. We have a great one at welterweight. Niklas Stolze, green mask. He's going to be taking on Night Train, Jared Gooden and Matt. I had a chance to watch Jared Gooden's interview with the media at, Media Day today. And of course, who's got the first question? John Morgan asked him a couple of good ones. There are only a couple of people that ask questions because for these fight nights, that's all they tend to get. And when they're competing against Bellator, who have an excellent card coming up this weekend, it is a little tricky, but I did learn that Jared Gooden had an uncle that was somehow involved in comic books, and that's how he got the name Night Train. Google that one. It's a neat one. Cool. Green mask. That's a fun one. These two guys are primary strikers, and that's why I'm excited about this fight. And originally, it was supposed to be Niklas Stolze. He was going to be taking on the man himself out of Tunisia, Mounir Lazzez. Unfortunately, Lazzez's visa, a little bit of issues, complications there. Gooden was ready on short notice, and he has a teammate in Philip Rowe who's also on this card who's taking on Orion Cosce. That's why it's so exciting. But from Jared Gooden, it's weird. You look at both of these guys' records, and they have wins kind of every single way. Little bit of decision, little bit of knockout, little bit of submission. And for Niklas Stolze, 4 of his overall submission wins are all by the same submission. But overall, Niklas Stolze, 17-3 total K1 record. He is a primary kickboxer. He can take it to the mat, but you're most likely not going to see that. I'm excited because, again, Stolze is probably going to strike with Gooden. Gooden is one of those guys that throws a lot of primary power shots to close the distance. You saw that in his fight against Alan Jouban. That was a great one. But the number that you hate to see, Matt, and I pulled this one up, of his fights against Abubakar Nurmagomedov and Alan Jouban, 6 total scores of 30-27 against them. Ooh. It's tricky. He did rock Jouban with some good shots in that fight. But in the Nurmagomedov fight, it was weird because he just looked so worried about the takedown attempt that he kept his hands low, which allowed Nurmagomedov to strike against him. And Nurmagomedov, with them hands, he looked amazing in that fight. So for Gooden, he comes into this one. The question from John Morgan, did you do a lot of tape study? Do you know anything about your opponent? No, I'm going to let my coaches handle it. Haven't really focused on it. And I don't like to watch a lot of tape. And listen, there's 2 camps of fighters. I watch a lot of tape and I game plan myself, or I let my coaches worry about it and I don't think at all about my opponent.
I like it a lot more when the fighters watch the tape, though.
That's how Gooden's coming into this one, and he found out about this fight on Tuesday, taking on Germany Stolze. Matt, what is your thoughts on this one? And Max Friedman is going to be going crazy with the pronunciation of one Niklas Stolze's last name.
Jared Gooden's the type of guy to be billed as a striker, but get consistently outstruck 2 straight fights. He's a really awkward fighter because you do have to kind of take both fights case by case because Alan Jouban, listen, if he's going to beat you, he is going to use his range, use his dynamic movement, chain combinations together. And really, Gooden just kind of got behind in that fight and could never really catch up. And you were right. He was able to hurt Jouban, but the fact that he wasn't able to keep pace with a 9-year-old Jouban at the time is a little bit disappointing. You at least assume the 26 at the time, Jared Gooden would be able to keep up with him. And I know Jouban's a guy who traditionally is known for his cardio, but when a guy's 13 years older than you, you would assume that you'd have a bit of a cardio edge. So that was a little bit disappointing to see. And I remember both of us just openly made fun of him in that Abubakar Nurmagomedov fight just because of how odd it was. Because it was okay, he openly dismissed his opponent striking that fight week. He was like, he can't strike with me. And what did we see? We watched Nurmagomedov move from side to side, throw combinations together, and that really does seem to be the problem with Gooden. Anyone who does throw with combination and who can get in and out of the pocket somewhat effectively, listen, Jouban was sort of watching what he was doing every now and then and eating a few shots because of it, but for the most part, if you are able to get in and get out, Gooden does load up a lot on his shots, and he is one of those guys that unless you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's not often that he's the one getting the knockout, you know? It's almost like you have to mess up for him to land that good shot. And Niklas Stolze, listen, he had an awful UFC debut against Ramzan Emeev. It wasn't great. He just got taken down and controlled a lot. And honestly, I thought a lot more of his grappling going into that fight. I thought he would at least be able to get back up to his feet a little bit more effectively. And I understand Ramzan Emeev does have great top control and he is a good wrestler, but still, Niklas Stolze, he's got 7 wins by submission on his record. I just expected a little bit more.
That's where it's deceiving because he's going to pepper you up on the feet. He's going to try and maybe take you down if he drops you. And then again, if you look at it for Jared Gooden, the questions that we had going into his last 2 fights, the level of competition was a little suspect. And some of the losses, He lost to Bruno Oliveira, good fighter, who ended up losing on Contender Series, which was weird because he lost to Carlos Ulberg. Mike Graves, yikes. But, you know, you lose to a guy like that. He beats Will Santiago that was in the UFC at one point. But, like, the win's coming in. He loses to Oliveira. He beats Marcel Stamps 4-1. That was in 2019. He beats Jay Jackson 3-13. And then he beats Trent McCowan 8-4. And that was a back and forth fight until he finishes him. But if you look at it for Niklas Stolze, again, finishes rear naked, rear naked, rear naked, rear naked, punches. And then his fight against Omar Jesus Santana coming into the UFC. That's a lot of fun to watch. He had quite a bit of time off between fights. So that was early 2019. Then he fought in July last year against Amiv. Some judges, very few, one of them actually in the fight and a couple on MMA decisions, gave the first round to Stolze. But again, the weird thing with Ramzan Amiv, he's just going to chain takedowns. And even if he can't keep you down, he'll force you back down. Exactly. And then the last round, he gets tired and he strikes, which is always scary if you're betting on Ramzan Amiv. But in this fight, again, the things that I like about Stolze, he throws a lot of kicks, but he goes to the leg, to the thigh, to the body, to the head, and he has that crazy
offense is really similar to Alan Jouban's if you want to simplify it. Like if you really want to just look at his striking, he does strike in a similar way to Alan Jouban.
And he throws this sneaky back foot kick that you have to really watch out for because he disguises it well, almost like a Thiago Santos when he had both of his ACLs and MCLs. So for me, I look at this fight. It's crazy where it opened because it automatically corrected itself. Niklas Stolze opened a plus 110 underdog. He's minus 200 favorite right now. Jared Gooden opened at a minus 130 favorite. He's a plus 164 right now. Matt, I'm going to have to pull up the Tapology votes because I don't lie about this stuff. We haven't actually looked at it.
No,
this is poor planning on the Fight Night Picks boys' end. But if we look at it, this fight is on the main card at a 970 total votes, 79% Stolze, 81% by decision for the 21% that have Gooden, 55% by decision, 32% by knockout. Matt, I think if Jared Gooden's going to win, he's going to knock out Niklas Stolze.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see him beating him by decision. I mean, he has put decent volume together. He did in his Jouban fight, and he rocked him a couple of times. But again, I think if you're going to beat Stolze, you're going to finish him, which is incredibly contradictory to both guys' losses because for Gooden, he only has one loss by TKO. All of Stolze's losses are by decision. Again, pretty well the same thing for Gooden. So I think if you're going the decision path in this fight, I think that's fair to say. But we have seen some of these short notice replacements come in, knock guys out. So maybe you want to go that way. And Gooden has a lot of single shot power. But I like Stolze in this one based on the volume, the kickboxing credentials.
I think Gooden could time a big overhand off a kick of Stolze, kind of like Aaron Pico does a lot. You see that over in Bellator. He's really great at timing overhands with it. But other than that one scenario, I do agree with you. I like the volume of Stolze. I do like the overall durability of him. And it's not like Gooden's a guy who's going to go out and get hurt a lot. But even against Nurmagomedov, like he was eating some clean shots and he was definitely getting stunned by them, to say the least. So I do think that if Stolze can start to land combinations together, again, maybe not by TKO, but I do feel like the volume will win out in the end.
Both of us going with a guy that's training out of Fennec Jiu-Jitsu as well as Syndicate MMA with one half of your co-main event, Sean Strickland. We are, of course, going with Niklas Stolze in this fight. You let us know. Maybe we're crazy. Should we look at X3 and Fusion XL's own Jared Gooden? Let us know down below in the comments section who you're riding with in this fight. And man, we've got some big fights coming up on this card. Well, the main event anyway. Holy smokes, you got Uriah Hall taking on Sean Strickland, so you're not going to want to miss that. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we say with a bit of a lag over the internet,
let's get into it.